Denuvo sucks. Some of you might agree with me immediately and some might not. Maybe you've heard the name but don't really know what it is. I'm going to explain everything in this video so we can all collectively agree that Denuvo sucks. Before we get into the deep explanation, I'll give you a quick gist so you don't feel lost as we progress. So, what is Denuvo? Denuvo is an anti-tampering system. The games we play are made of code, and Denuvo makes sure that code remains exactly as it is without being modified. It does these checks in multiple ways, but do not confuse this with your typical DRM. A DRM basically checks if the account trying to run the game actually owns it by making a quick call to the servers. Once it passes, the game launches. But you won't believe the extent Denuvo goes to just to prevent piracy and how despite all those efforts, it still fails perfectly. Let's look at the past and the present to see why it sucks. The first game to use Denuvo was FIFA 15 back in 2014. Before this, games used to be cracked on launch day. For the first time, crackers couldn't break a game immediately and it shook the whole community. Publishers thought a system was finally born that would stop piracy forever. Many games started shipping with Denuvo, but the victory was short-lived. Crackers found a way and broke FIFA 15 within a few months. So what was so special about Denuvo that it took the hackers months? The answer is in how Denuvo gets inside a game and what it does to the code. Trust me, this is where things get genuinely interesting. When a game is developed, it uses standard coding languages like C++, but it isn't shipped that way because anyone could read the code. Instead, it is converted into machine-level code and then shipped as an exe file. Games with Denuvo add an extra step. Denuvo takes certain portions of that machine code and converts them into an alien language that only Denuvo systems understand. To translate that code back to its initial state when the game needs it, Denuvo packs the exe file with its own virtual machine, which handles the decryption on the fly. If you own games with Denuvo and feel like they lag, this is the reason. But Denuvo doesn't stop there. When you launch a game, Steam or Epic Games check if you own it. That's standard. But Denuvo sits on top of that like a bodyguard. Before the loading screen even boots up, Denuvo sends a request to its own servers. It creates a fingerprint of your account and your specific hardware to validate you. And then it generates a temporary ticket. This ticket usually lasts 14 to 15 days. That means if you buy a single player story game and try to launch it without the internet, it might not work. If you're traveling and your ticket expires, you're locked out of the game you paid for until you connect back to their servers. And you thought Sony was bad for requiring internet activation every 30 days. This means if Denuvo's servers ever shut down, you won't be able to play your games at all unless the developers manually remove it. And let's be honest, if it's an old game, they probably won't even bother. Once authorized, Denuvo doesn't stop there. It keeps pinging the server and monitoring the code while you play. It constantly compares the code in your memory with the original code. If it detects even a slight change, the game crashes. Now that you know what Denuvo is, let's take a look at the cracker's perspective to understand the scale of this. Before Denuvo, cracking games was significantly easier. Like I mentioned, games are usually converted into machine-level code and then shipped. So to crack them, hackers just used to reverse engineer the whole thing and convert it back into something humans can actually read and understand. To do this, they used IDA Pro, which is basically the ultimate software to reverse engineer any code base. Once they converted it, they would start debugging the entire thing using the x64 debugger. To debug a game, you actually have to execute it. So hackers would launch the game and play it completely from 0 to 100%, unlocking every achievement and cutscene just to monitor the code and find the specific line that checks for ownership, so they could bypass it by hardcoding the value or just ripping it out of the codebase entirely. On the other hand, cracking Denuvo is a completely different story. Denuvo is actively monitoring for those tools, and the moment it detects them, it knows you're watching it and immediately corrupts the game. So how do the crackers even bypass this? Well, crackers don't just walk through the front door anymore. They have to sneak past the security cameras before they can even touch the safe. They have to disable Denuvo's detection systems first, which is why cracking a single game can take weeks or even months. Once they neutralize those cameras, they hit another wall because of that alien language. Hackers can't just debug it directly, and Denuvo even adds fake codes and dead-end paths just to confuse them. To crack it, a hacker has to play through the whole game while Denuvo's virtual machine decrypts the code, and they have to constantly monitor and store those decrypted pieces of code one by one until they have everything they need to break the game. After cracking the game, Famous repackers like FitGirl take the cracked game and compress it to distribute it on their websites. And just because you cracked one game doesn't mean you have beaten them all. Every game comes with a unique Denuvo build. The moment a hacker figures out a trick, Denuvo patches it for the next release. It's a never-ending cat and mouse race. So, who are these groups? These are anonymous underground teams called scene groups. They do this for reputation and not for the money. But in recent times, a lot of latest games with Denuvo are being cracked in hours or days. So, how is that possible? Let's take a look at Crimson Desert. It had Denuvo added days before release and was bypassed within 24 hours using the Hypervisor method. For those of you who are curious, I'll make a separate video explaining this, as that's a whole different story. And it was not only Crimson Desert that was cracked. Newer games like Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata were also cracked using this very method. So let's discuss the most important question. Does it affect performance? The answer is yes. Constantly running verification checks and decrypting protected code in the background while monitoring for debuggers causes frame drops and longer loading times. Now the impact varies from game to game depending on how it was implemented, but the fact that any impact exists at all on a game that you paid full price for is simply unacceptable. It's ironic how an anti-pirating software is actually the best motivation for piracy. So now, do you agree with me when I tell you that Denuvo sucks? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Bye.